Stand in front of your car in daylight and look straight at the headlight. The plastic has gone the color of weak tea. There is a fine chalk on the surface that comes off gray on your fingertip. Along the top edge, where the sun sits longest, the yellow deepens into brown. 10 years ago, that same lens was clear enough to see the bulb behind it, the chrome of the reflector, the little metal clip holding it in place. At night, the beam used to reach the end of the block. Now it dies about 30 feet out and bleeds sideways into the shoulder. So you do one of three things. You wash it again. You pay for the wax at the car wash and tell yourself it looks a little better. Or you look up what a new headlight assembly costs, find a number somewhere between $300 and $900, and decide you can live with it. All three of those are wrong. It is not that you did not wash it well enough. The yellow is not sitting on the lens. It is not road film. It is not bug residue baked on through a summer. It is not the pollen that coats everything in April. You could scrub that lens for a full hour with the strongest cleaner on your garage shelf, and it would look exactly the same when you put the bottle down. The color is not on the surface. The color is in it. Your headlight is not glass. It has not been glass on an American car since the early 90s. It is polycarbonate, and polycarbonate cannot survive direct sunlight on its own. It survives because of something the factory put on top of it. That layer is gone from your car. And the ordinary thing you have been doing to keep the front of the car looking decent is a large part of why it left. You can bring that lens back to something very close to factory clarity in about 40 minutes of work. The material that does the actual cutting costs around $3. There is no heat gun, no special machine, nothing you have to order and wait 4 days for. And here is the part almost nobody expects. The work never happens dry. The surface stays flooded from the first second to the last, and the color of the water running off the bottom edge of the lens is the thing that tells you when to stop. Here is what is actually happening to that plastic. When the lens was molded, it went through a second process. A hard coating was applied over the polycarbonate and cured, and that coating carries ultraviolet absorbers. Think of it as sunscreen that was baked onto the plastic at the factory. It is thin. On most cars, it is a few 10,000ths of an inch. It is not there to make the lens shiny. It is there to eat the ultraviolet light before the ultraviolet light reaches the polycarbonate underneath. That coating has a working life. Sun degrades it. Heat from the bulb pushes on it from the inside. Road grit sandblasts it at 70 miles an hour. Car wash brushes drag across it. Over years it thins, then it starts to micro-crack, and eventually it wears through in patches, usually at the top of the lens first because that is the face aimed at the sky. The moment the ultraviolet light reaches bare polycarbonate, the plastic itself starts to change. The sun breaks bonds in the surface layer of the material, and the byproducts of that reaction absorb blue light. Absorbing blue is what makes something look yellow. That is the amber you are seeing. It is not a stain on top of the plastic. It is the top few thousandths of the plastic, chemically altered. And you cannot wash a sunburn off skin. You cannot wash this off either. Now here is the part that matters more than anything else in this video. Almost every quick fix for a foggy headlight works by abrading the surface. Toothpaste does. The wipe in the kit does. The compound the detailer used does. They take off some of the yellow, and the lens looks better in the parking lot that afternoon. But nothing was put back. Whatever was left of the original protective layer was polished away along with the yellow, and the lens went back into the sun completely bare. Bare polycarbonate degrades far faster than coated polycarbonate. That is why the second time it happened, it took 2 years instead of 8, and the third time it took 1. The lens was not ruined by the sun alone. It was ruined the day somebody rubbed the last of its sunscreen off and left it naked. If this is already making sense of the last 6 years of your car, take a second and subscribe, because what comes next is the part that actually pulls the yellow out, and it is not a product in a bottle. The first method is abrasion done properly with water in stages, not polishing, cutting. Understand what you are doing before you start. You are not cleaning this lens. You are removing material from it. The yellowed layer is shallow, so you are taking off roughly 1 to 2 thousandths of an inch of plastic from the entire face of the lens and leaving fresh, unaltered polycarbonate exposed underneath. That is why nothing in a spray bottle has ever worked. There is nothing to dissolve. There is only material to remove. Go buy wet or dry sandpaper. It is the black paper, silicon carbide grit, and the back of the sheet says wet or dry on it. Do not use the tan sandpaper from the woodworking aisle. That paper uses a glue that fails in water, and it will fall apart in your hand in 90 seconds. You want 5 grits, 800, 1000, 1500, 2000, and 3000. A sheet of each is enough for both headlights, and it will run you around $3. Before anything else, wash the lens with car, soap, and water and dry it. Then run a fingernail lightly across the surface. If it feels smooth and the yellow is light, start at 1000. If you feel a fine crackle, like the surface of an old oil painting, or if there is chalk transferring to your finger, start at 800. If there is heavy brown and visible flaking of the old coating, start at 600 and add it to your list. Cut each sheet into quarters and put them in a bowl of water for 10 minutes. Wet paper cuts differently than dry paper. The backing softens, the sheet lies flat against the curve of the lens instead of bridging over it, and the grit stays exposed instead of clogging. Tape next. Painter's tape, 2 layers, running along every edge of the lens and overlapping about ½ inch onto the surrounding paint and trim. The sandpaper does not care what it touches. 2 layers gives you a margin for the moment your hand slips, and your hand will slip at least once. Fill a spray bottle with water and 1 single drop of dish soap. 1 drop. More than that, and you get suds you cannot see through. Now the sanding. Soak the lens. Lay the quarter sheet flat under your fingers, not bunched in your fist, so pressure spreads evenly. Sand in straight horizontal strokes, left to right, across the whole width of the lens. Use the weight of your hand and nothing more. Pressing harder does not cut faster on wet paper. It just digs isolated deep scratches you will spend the next 20 minutes chasing. Spray again every 15 to 20 seconds. The surface must never go dry, not once, not for a moment. Watch the water. On the first grit, it will run off the bottom edge, yellow or amber and slightly thick, like weak coffee with milk in it. That is the degraded layer leaving the car. Keep going until the runoff loses its color and goes milky white. Milky white is just plastic dust, and plastic dust means you are into clean material. 3 to 4 minutes of steady work per lens on that first grit is normal. Then rinse the whole area with clean water, wipe it with a clean microfiber, and look at it dry. You want the entire face uniformly dull. If there are shiny patches left, those are low spots the paper has not reached yet, and every one of them will still be yellow at the end. Go back and work them before you move on. Here is the detail that separates a headlight that ends up genuinely clear from one that ends up slightly cloudy forever. When you change grits, you change direction. The first grit went horizontal. Do 1000 vertically, top to bottom. Do 1500 horizontally again. Do 2000 vertically. Do 3000 horizontally. Cross-hatching like this is not a superstition. Each grit leaves its own field of scratches, and the only job of the next finer grit is to erase them. When your strokes run across the previous ones at 90 degrees, you can see exactly when the old scratch pattern disappears, because it disappears in one direction while the new one appears in the other. Sanding every grit in the same direction hides the leftovers, and leftovers from a coarse grit are what cause a lens that looks clear from 10 feet and hazy from 2. Rinse the lens and your hands between every single grit. 1 stray grain of 800 dragged into your 2000 pass will carve a scratch that the 2000 cannot remove, and you will be starting that stage over. Give each grit 3 or 4 minutes per lens. Total time on the sanding, both headlights, is around 25 minutes. When you finish 3000 and dry it off, the lens will look worse than when you started. Flat, even dead gray, like the frosted glass in a bathroom window. That is exactly right, and it is also the moment most people panic and assume they have destroyed a headlight. They have not, and here is why. That gray is millions of microscopic scratches, all the same size, all scattering light in every direction instead of letting it pass through. Light hitting a rough surface bounces off at random angles, and your eye reads random scattering as white. Take that roughness far enough down, and the surface stops scattering. Once the surface irregularities get smaller than the wavelengths of visible light, light passes straight through, and the plastic goes clear. That is all polishing is. It is sanding with grit too fine to see. So the second method is the polish, and it is the step that turns gray back into glass. Buy a plastic polish or a fine automotive cutting compound. The headlight-specific ones work. So does a decent one-step paint compound. What matters is that it says it is safe for clear coat or plastic, and that it feels slightly gritty between your fingers rather than slick. Fold a clean microfiber into a thick pad. Put a quarter-sized amount of compound on it. Work a section about 4 inches by 4 inches at a time. Tight circles, firm pressure, 60 seconds on that section, then flip to a clean part of the towel and wipe it dry to inspect. It will be noticeably clearer. Move to the next section and overlap the one before it by an inch. By hand, expect 5 to 8 minutes per lens. Your forearm will complain. That is the price of not owning a polisher. If you do have a drill, use a 3-inch foam polishing pad and keep the speed between 1,200 and 1,600 revolutions per minute. Keep it moving constantly and never let it sit in one place longer than about 10 seconds. Polycarbonate softens with heat, and a pad held still on a lens can raise the temperature enough to distort the surface into a permanent ripple that no amount of sanding will ever flatten out. Slow speed, constant motion, light pressure. Then do a second pass that almost nobody does. Take a completely fresh, dry microfiber and buff the whole lens again with no new product at all. Compound leaves a thin residue that reads as a faint haze in bright light, and more importantly, that residue is oily. Remember that. It matters in about 2 minutes. At this point, the headlight looks incredible. Clear, deep, wet-looking, better than the other car in the driveway. And this is precisely where almost everybody puts the towel down and calls it finished. It is also precisely why almost everybody is looking at yellow again by the end of the following summer. The third method is the coating, and it is the only step that decides whether this lasts 4 months or 4 years. There is nothing Japanese about a polycarbonate headlight lens. It was not invented in Japan, and there is no traditional Japanese method for restoring one. What is Japanese here is the thinking, and the clearest example of it is urushi, the lacquer used on Japanese wooden bowls and boxes for centuries. The wood is not what makes those objects last. The lacquer does. It goes on in thin coats, each one cured before the next, and the surface is renewed rather than replaced when it dulls. The object underneath is ordinary. The discipline of protecting it is what carries it through generations. Your headlight is now bare, freshly cut plastic with no ultraviolet protection at all, which means right now it is more vulnerable than it was this morning. It needs its lacquer back. You have 2 realistic options. The better one is a 2-part automotive clear coat in an aerosol can, the kind with an activator you release into the can before spraying. It costs around $15 to $20 for the can, and it is the same chemistry that protects the paint on your car, which is a surface that survives outdoors for a decade. The simpler one is a dedicated headlight coating that comes as a wipe or a small bottle with an applicator. Around $10. Easier to apply, generally shorter-lived, and it will need renewing more often. Whichever you use, do this first, because if you skip it, nothing will bond, and the whole job fails within weeks. Wipe the entire lens with isopropyl alcohol, 70% or stronger, on a clean cloth, and let it flash off. That removes the oils left by the polishing compound. Coating applied over polish residue does not stick to plastic. It sticks to the oil, and the oil is not attached to anything. The lens must also be completely dry, and the car should be out of direct sun and above about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. For the aerosol, hold the can 8 inches away and move in one steady pass from one side of the lens to the other, past the edge, then back. 3 light coats with 10 minutes between them. Light is the word that matters. A heavy coat runs, and a run in clear coat over a headlight is a permanent lens-shaped mistake. The third coat is the one that flows out glossy. For the wipe-on type, go in one direction only, one wet pass, edge to edge, and do not go back over an area that has started to set. Chasing a stripe that is already drying will drag the film into ridges. Then leave it alone. Out of the sun, out of the rain, for a minimum of 24 hours before it gets washed or driven through weather. A coating that looks dry to the touch in 20 minutes has not finished cross-linking. All of this belongs to one larger system, and if you want the complete Japanese method for keeping the things you own in good condition instead of replacing them, The book is linked in the description. It is there if you want it. The fourth method is what makes this the last time you ever do the first three, and it takes 10 minutes twice a year. Even a good clear coat is being eaten from the moment you finish. So you put a sacrificial layer on top of it, and you keep replacing that layer instead of replacing the coat underneath. Twice a year, at the start of spring and again in the fall, wash the lens, dry it, and apply a paste wax or a synthetic sealant that states ultraviolet protection on the label. Let it haze, buff it off with a clean microfiber. 10 minutes for both lenses. A ceramic-type spray sealant rated as safe for plastic and trim works the same way and lasts somewhat longer. The wax is not there to make the light shine. It is there to be destroyed. Ultraviolet light, acid rain, and road salt spend themselves on the wax, and when the wax is used up, you put down another one, and the coat underneath is still intact. The Japanese word for this pattern of small, repeated, unglamorous improvement is kaizen, and it applies to a headlight exactly as well as it applies to a factory floor. 10 minutes twice a year is nothing. It is the difference between a lens that is still clear when you sell the car and a lens you sand again in 18 months. There is a free version of prevention too, and it is simply where the car sits. Ultraviolet damage is cumulative exposure, so anything that cuts hours in the sun cuts damage. If your driveway faces west and the afternoon sun hits the front of the car for 4 hours a day, back the car in. The rear of the car has no polycarbonate optics that yellow. If you have a carport or a garage and you have been parking outside out of habit, that habit is worth more to your headlights than any product in this video. The fifth method is not a technique. It is a rule, and it is the one that decides whether a set of headlights lasts 15 years or 2. Never wipe a dry headlight. The dust that settles on your car overnight is mostly mineral. Silica, mostly, which is the same material as sand and is harder than any coating ever applied to a lens. When you take a rag, or the corner of your sleeve, or a paper towel from the gas pump, and you drag it across a dry lens to clear the dust off before you drive, you are not cleaning it. You are sanding it with the finest grit available, for free, several times a week, for years. That is the ordinary thing that took your factory coating off. The lens gets washed wet or it does not get touched. Water first, always, so the grit floats instead of dragging. Soft, clean cloth, one direction, then dry with a fresh microfiber. And keep ammonia-based glass cleaner off it, because ammonia attacks polycarbonate and its coatings and can craze the surface into a web of fine cracks. Glass cleaner belongs on the windshield, never on the lens. Before the part of this video that will save you the most money, if you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Now the things that do not work, and the specific reason each one fails. Toothpaste. It does something, which is why the myth survives. Toothpaste contains a mild abrasive, usually hydrated silica, and enough rubbing will take some oxidized material off. But the abrasive is far too fine to remove a layer that is thousandths of an inch deep, so it lifts the top of the discoloration and leaves the rest. It also leaves the lens bare, unsealed, and unprotected. The result looks better for 2 weeks and then yellows faster than it did before, because whatever coating was still hanging on is now in the sink. Insect repellent with DEET. This one is genuinely destructive, and it circulates constantly online because the first 30 seconds are dramatic. DEET is a solvent for polycarbonate. It does not remove the yellow layer. It softens and partially dissolves the surface of the plastic, and a dissolved surface temporarily flows smooth and looks clear. Then it rehardens with its structure wrecked, and within weeks you get crazing, a fine spreading spider web of cracks that goes into the material. No amount of sanding removes it, because it is not on the surface. It is through it. If someone tells you to spray bug spray on a headlight, they are telling you to melt it. Baking soda and vinegar. When you combine them, they react, foam, and neutralize each other. What you are left with is mostly water with dissolved salt in it, and almost none of the baking soda you started with, so even the mild scrubbing value of the powder is gone. The fizzing looks like it is doing something. Chemically, it is doing nothing to a layer of sun-degraded plastic. Wax alone, or a spray restorer with no abrasive step. Wax fills microscopic texture and adds gloss, which improves the optical appearance for a few days, especially while it is wet. It does not remove a single micron of the degraded layer, because it has no abrasive in it. When the wax wears, the yellow is exactly where it was. Restoration kits that end in a protectant wipe instead of a coating. These are the ones that make people believe the whole idea does not work. The sanding stages in the kit are usually fine. Then the last step is a wipe that behaves like a wax, lasting weeks. The lens is left bare in strong sun, and bare polycarbonate can visibly yellow in a single summer. People conclude that restoration lasts 3 months. Restoration lasts 3 months when it is not sealed. Machine buffing, dry, at high speed, with an aggressive pad. Heat is the enemy of this material. A wool pad at 3,000 RPM on a headlight can soften the plastic locally, and the pad drags the softened surface into a permanent distortion that reads as a wavy or foggy patch you cannot polish out. Everything on plastic is done slow, cool, and wet, and one that costs people real money. Replacing the whole assembly because the lens is yellow when the reflector inside is still perfect. The clarity problem is on the outside of a $200 to $900 part. Sanding costs $3. Which brings up the question of what to buy, whether it is a kit today or a headlight assembly eventually. For a kit, read the last step on the box before you read anything else on the box. If the final stage is described as a wax, a polish, a protectant, or a shine enhancer, put it back. If the final stage is a clear coat, a ceramic coating, or an ultraviolet sealant with a stated cure time, that kit is worth buying. Cure time is the giveaway. Anything that needs to cure is forming a film. Anything that is ready immediately is sitting on top. For sandpaper, buy wet or dry silicon carbide sheets and buy the full grit range in one go. Skipping from 800 straight to 2000 does not save time. It costs time, because 2000 cannot erase 800 scratches and you will end up going back. For a replacement assembly, the thing that determines how long the new lens stays clear is the factory hard coat, and that is where cheap units cut cost. Look for the DOT and SAE markings molded into the lens, since those indicate the unit is built to the federal standard rather than being sold as an off-road or show part. Original equipment or a recognized aftermarket brand will carry a real cured hard coat. Unbranded units frequently yellow within 2 or 3 years, and some arrive with visible orange peel in the plastic straight out of the box. Check the housing, not just the lens. There should be an intact rubber gasket around the bulb access and a small vent, usually a short rubber tube or a breathable plug. That vent is what lets the housing equalize as it heats and cools. A blocked or missing vent is why headlights fill with condensation. And if you are buying used, hold the assembly up and look for water staining or a dull, dusty reflector, because the aluminum coating on a reflector degrades from heat and cannot be restored. Now the honest limits, because there are 3 things this cannot fix. If the fog is on the inside of the lens, none of this touches it. Condensation, a failed housing seal, or a hazy film on the inner surface all sit behind the plastic, and no amount of exterior work reaches them. You can usually tell by looking at the lens at an angle. If the surface reflects sharply and the cloudiness appears to float behind it, it is internal. If the crazing has gone deep, a faint milkiness can remain. Sanding removes a couple of thousandths of an inch. Cracking from long-term solvent damage can be deeper than that, and taking off enough material to reach the bottom of it would distort the optics. The lens will improve substantially. It may not go perfectly clear, and clarity is not the same as output. If the reflector behind the lens has burned or flaked, the beam stays weak, no matter how good the plastic looks. Restoring the lens on a car with a dead reflector gets you a clear window onto a dull light. The safety part is short. Wear eye protection while sanding and while spraying. Tape everything you do not want to sand or spray, and assume you will contact whatever you did not tape. Do the aerosol clear coat outdoors or in a fully open garage, because it is flammable and the solvents should not be breathed, and keep it away from any pilot light or heater. Never work on a lens that is hot from the sun or from a long drive, because warm polycarbonate marks easily. And if you remove the headlight assembly from the car, disconnect the battery first. So, the whole thing in order. Wet sand the lens through 800, 1000, 1500, 2000, and 3000, changing direction with every grit and never letting it go dry. Polish it back to clarity with a plastic compound in small sections. Wipe it with alcohol and seal it with a real ultraviolet clear coat, then leave it 24 hours. Put a wax or sealant on top twice a year so the coating underneath never takes the hit. And never, ever wipe a dry lens. What you have at the end of that is not a headlight that looks better. It is a headlight that is protected again, which is the thing it lost years before you noticed the color. The same thinking, applied to everything else in your home, is in the book linked below. And it costs about $3 and one Saturday morning instead of the price of a new assembly. Now go out back and look at your grill grates, because you have the same problem in a different material. That black crust is not burnt food, and the wire brush you have been attacking it with is doing two things wrong at once. It is stripping away the carbonized layer that keeps food from sticking, and it is shedding steel bristles that end up on the grate and then in dinner. Soaking it overnight is worse. The standard American advice on that grill is destroying it a little more every weekend, and the Japanese approach uses no wire, no soaking, and one thing you almost certainly already own. That is the next video. See you in the next one.